good evening, everybody. What I was going to do is just do a quick introduction to myself and my role at the Environment Agency, and then do a quick run through of some of the things that the Environment Agency is involved with. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who will do a bit more of an in-depth talk on a couple of the current pieces of work that we're doing. So yeah, my name's Jenny Gamble. I joined the Environment Agency in 1998 in water quality permitting, and then I went into waste and water regulation for several years, and then since about 2005 I've stayed on the water side of things and not so much waste work. Currently I'm a chartered water and environment manager with CIWEM and a senior environment officer for diffuse pollution in the West Midlands part of the Environment Agency. A lot of my role is focused on looking at diffuse pollution, including sort of issues around agriculture, issues around phosphates. At the moment, there's a lot of work focused on the River Wye in Herefordshire and Wales. It's a protected area, it's a special area of conservation, and it's been quite affected by phosphate levels, and that's taken up quite a lot of my role at the moment. I'm also involved in various pollution incidents, take part in standby rotas, and do quite a bit of flood incident work, as do my colleagues who are on the call here. So Andrew, could you put the presentation on, please?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I'll just see if I can get that up now. Does that come up, Jenny, for you?
That's come up with all the slides down the left-hand side.
Okay, just bear with me a second.
Left-hand side, Oz.
For beginning.
Right, yeah, there we go. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
If you just go through until the reg, industry and waste one, that would be brilliant.
Okay.
So as I said, I'm just going to whiz through what the Environment Agency does. It doesn't cover every single thing that we do, but it does cover most of the major things we do. So we regulate industry and waste. So this is just a little picture of either a unregulated site or a site that has got a permit from us that is not sticking to what their permit says. So we've got waste regulation teams who will visit sites that are already permitted, and we've got a permitting team that will grant permits to certain industries, and then permitted sites would have regular visits from ourselves to check permit compliance. Oz, do you want to do the next slide, please? We're heavily involved with water quality and water resources. So the picture on the left is a ferric salt pollution from a water company. It led to a large fish kill and a £500,000 enforcement undertaking that was money that the water company gave to a local catchment partnership to fund environmental improvements in the area. So that's one of our legal options is, we can prosecute, or we can look at other ways of getting environmental outcomes. So although we don't want to see pollution incidents like that, we are keen to work with companies and get the best outcome that we can. The second picture is a water meter. We do permit issuing for water taking, so that could be for agriculture, it could be for industry, and we do regular checks on compliance with those permits. And also there are times of the year, especially in areas like the Wye catchment, where permits are put on hold and they're not allowed to abstract due to flow levels in the river. And in those times of the year, we will go out and we will check that people aren't abstracting when they're not permitted to. Andrew, do you want to, next slide? Fisheries. Environment Agency's got a large fisheries section. We take money from rod license fees. As you can see the picture of the license on the right hand side there, that money is used for habitat creation and improvement. It's used for projects that include fish passage, so putting in fish passes where previously there might have been access problems to fish. We also enforce against illegal fishing activity. So we have specialist enforcement teams for fisheries who will go out routinely and also in response to people that contact us, and they will enforce a lot of the fisheries legislation. We've also got a fish farm in Nottinghamshire, and in 2019 there were 500,000 fish released from that fish farm to improve stocks countrywide, really, throughout England. Next slide, please, Andrew. Navigation, we control navigation of inland rivers, estuaries and harbour. So that's a picture of Abingdon Lock. So a lot of the lock keepers and people that work around those areas are Environment Agency employees. And we also, the nearest one to here is we've got some navigation on the Wye and the Severn, and then we've got a harbour down at Lydney in Gloucestershire. So we do get involved in that, perhaps not so much in the West Midlands as Thames area does, but we do have some in the Midlands. Next slide, Oz. Conservation and ecology, picture one here. So the picture on the left-hand side shows some of the work that we've done with partners. So this is work done with the Wildlife Trust and Leeds University, a lot of tree planting as part of a natural flood management project. So we do try and work as much as we can with partners as well, whether that's it gets best value for money and secures funding for different projects. Next picture is a water vole, so that ties in with our habitat improvement work and also our pollution incident work and pollution prevention work. We're looking at preventing pollution to preserve habitats that are already there, as well as providing new habitats. Last slide, Andrew. And one of the things that we're most known for maybe is our work around flood risk. So we manage the risk of flooding from rivers, the sea, estuaries and reservoirs, and we provide warnings as shown on the first picture there. So the warnings are divided into flood alerts where flooding is possible, flood warnings where flooding is expected and people need to take action, and severe flood warnings where there is one, I think, on that map in red, where there's a danger to life and people need to take immediate action. We also install and maintain defences. So there's a picture at the top, sea defences. And then the Thames Barrier at the bottom there is run by the Environment Agency, and obviously it's one of our major flood structures. We also have plenty of smaller structures. Some of them are permanent and a lot of the others are temporary. So things like the Iron Bridge flood barriers, temporary barriers that will be put up when there's a possibility of flooding and then taken down as soon as we can after that. That's it from me. I'm happy to take questions. I think the questions are going to be at the end. If everyone's okay, shall we pass on to my colleague, Dougal?
I'll just stop sharing, Dougal, and then you can do your bit.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I'll see if this works. Fingers crossed. Screen. Start broadcast. 3, 2, 1. Right, bear with me. I'll go to my slides, which are here. Okay, so I'm just going to talk through a few photographs and hopefully play a short video. As way of introduction, my name's Dougal Ziegler. I've worked for the Environment Agency since 2008, 2007 even. Since 2012, I've been a regulatory officer, an environment officer in Herefordshire. So looking after the wonderful River Wye and its tributaries. My particular patch is Hereford down to near Monmouth, so a large area. But there's 7 of us warranted officers in Herefordshire in the team. So we try and break it up into patches, but those are blurred lines. So the nature of our work is pretty darn diverse. We get called to all sorts of things. Essentially pollution incidents. So when fish go belly up or nasty things are spewing into rivers, we get the calls. So because Herefordshire is so rural, of course, predominantly most of my work is in agriculture. So Herefordshire is intensive, no doubt about it. Intensivity of agriculture has increased in the last 10 years in Herefordshire. Specifically, the problem that we face in the Y catchment, particularly in the Lug catchment, is the soil type. It's Herefordshire old red sandstone, most of it. It's lovely for growing. It's, crops love growing in it. Spuds, maize, asparagus, all sorts of weird and wonderful things get grown, but treat it without care, and heavy rains and bare soils can see those soils heading for our watercourses. And obviously with that comes pollution from physically from the soil itself, smothering gravels, and also the phosphates that are attached to those soils. This slide really is to demonstrate
Dougal,
maize.
sorry
Hello.
to interrupt, Dougal, it's Jen.
Yeah.
We
Hi.
can't see your screen. I can see the screen
yeah.
of...
Hang on, let me see if I can go back to here.
Try again with your sharing.
How long? When did it break off? I see. Okay, let's try Could you not see it from the very start? I can see.
No, at the moment I can see Richard Smalley's screen.
Somebody else's screen. Yeah. That's better. Okay. Sorry. Right, let's just try again then. Did you see any photographs at all? Was I just chatting away without anything sharing?
I'd whiz through the pictures again.
Okay, no problem. Start broadcast. Bear with me. Yeah, do let me know, Jen, because all I can see is my screen then. So it's useful if you tell me what's. So just tell me you can see some photographs now.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so where I was, sandy soils, maize types of crop, and I won't dwell on maize because it's quite a political issue, but in the last 10, 12 years, we've seen a real rise in the growth of maize for predominantly grown. That's been pushed forward with anaerobic digesters. So there's been a real increase recently in Herefordshire with maize fields. And the problem with maize is the runoff issues. So it's a late harvesting crop. It means that farmers have to use heavy machinery to remove it, to harvest it, which compacts soils. So when the rains come, you see this particular image here. You can still see the photos, can you, Jen?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So it rain falls on soils like this, and it just runs off, and it gathers speed and momentum. And what you get then is erosion. You get soils washing, fine soils finding their way to watercourses and causing untold damage. And it's a real issue. And we still have land managers and farmers that don't really realise the damage that is done by these fine silts smothering gravel beds in special rivers like the Wye and the Lug, salmon rivers, trout, and so many different macroinvertebrates. So that the deterioration of the water quality in recent times has been pretty rapid as more and more intensive farming takes place, and more soils are washed into those drains, into those ditches, into those tributaries, and into the main watercourses. This slide here is it's a good demonstration of how land use can affect watercourses. On the left there, you've got the Dewless Brook. This is in Pontrilas, so South Herefordshire, almost on the Welsh border. So yes, the stream on the left there is predominantly sheep farming and arable, permanent pasture, and on the right, that's the spud fields coming from lower land. And this was, just after a not particularly heavy rainfall event, really. So you start to see that the land use makes all the difference. This is this summer on the River Wye. Many of you, I'm sure, will have heard of algal blooms on the Wye. The worst I've ever seen in my time working on the river. It was the perfect storm. We had terrible floods last winter, and then a very, very hot and sunny springtime. All that soil, all that phosphate, just leads to this algal bloom, and that really shouldn't be there. That this is a new occurrence. This is something that's been getting worse and worse in the last 10 years. So I don't want to be too doom and gloom, because I'll depress you all this evening. But what can be done? Well, maize can be planted with more care. This photograph here shows maize stubble. This would have been undersown with ryegrass. And you need something to bind these soils. If they're left bare all winter, they will run, no matter if it's sloping, steep, whatever. If you leave it, it will wash. And so ryegrass can be quite helpful if you've got sheep to put on it afterwards. Not every farmer likes it. They feel they have to spray it off with glyphosate, and it gets in the way of their winter wheat and barley. But this slide here tried to show heavy. I should have probably filmed it. Clean water running off a grassy field. It's not full of mud. It's clean water, because those roots of the grass are binding those soils together. Okay, I'll just pause that and explain this. This is so yeah. What are we doing about it, and how are we trying to manage it? It's a really massive problem. I've been dealing with it for some years now. In the last 4 years, I think we've started to make some inroads into finding where the worst places are. So this is the Garran catchment. I'm a drone pilot for the Environment Agency. So we've started to use drones to demonstrate the scale of the problem. This footage this is the Garran. So it's just west of Ross. This isn't particularly steep land. This was last winter. So last winter was particularly wet, as you'll all remember. Farmers couldn't get on. These are potato fields, and they could barely get their tractors onto the land to sow the winter wheat and barleys and winter crops, the cover crops that should bind all these soils together. And without those crops, every time it rains, you will see monstrous amounts of sediment washing off these fields and either finding a highway drain or a ditch and heading for the watercourses. And it's a really sad sight, really. Obviously, the Environment Agency has to work with farmers. We can't just throw the book at farmers constantly. It's important for Herefordshire's economy is agriculture, but at the same time, some regulation must occur. So I don't know if this is showing very well on your screens, if it's buffering okay. Is it all right, Jenny? Can you?
Yeah, it's fine, Dougal. Yeah.
Okay, good. So this is stuff we found I think this is back in February. I filmed this. There it goes, heading down. That's into permanent pasture there, but it's heading for the Garran Brook. And there you see, that sandbank shouldn't be there. That should be nice, clean gravels. So right. I'm probably overkilling my time, Oz, and tell me if I need to get a move on. But I've got a few more slides. So the drone is helpful to a point to demonstrate the sort of path and the pathway and the receptors and demonstrate the issue. But finding bare soils, farmers have a responsibility now to grow something in the winter to cover crops. So we've been using satellite imagery. So this is this is the Sentinel-2 satellite. It whizzes over every 4 days, and every now and then we might get a clear day with no clouds, so we can see what's going on in the fields. So these fields, you can clearly see where they're bare. Chances are they've been recently studied with some wheat, hopefully, or something to hold those soils through the winter. We can then run through GIS, through our geomatics team, we run a model. So essentially here, the red outline, the computer model's picked up. It's picked up the bare soil color. It just works on colors, really. It's pretty accurate. Now the yellow is where we've interpolated LiDAR data. So the LiDAR, we can get an accurate forecast on slope. So then we can pick out where it's steepest. So rather than in previous years getting in your car and just driving around wondering where all this soil is coming from, we can now start to pinpoint particular fields. So we're targeting our visits. We're getting to a point where we can have a really good best guess at where the soils may be running off, and in such a way we're not necessarily targeting fields or farms that are just right by the main road that everyone sees, but we can go off the beaten track and actually find where things aren't being done very well. And of course, what with crop rotation, the goalposts move. So every year these fields change. Every 4 or 5 years is the crop rotation. So one year might be good, the next year might be terrible. And we can, with technology, it's great. We can get out in the field and we can gather evidence, and we can use a collector app to collect data in the field and take photographs, make notes. It saves it spatially to that point. So another officer in 2 years' time can see where we were, what the problem was, what notes we made, and we can upload letters and so forth that we sent to farmers. And so, yeah, enforcement. We obviously advice and guidance first off, but there will always be cases where we need to start using our powers to get farmers to do things. We can serve notices or even prosecute if we're deaf ears and all that. If we're not seeing any changes and the farmer just keeps making the same mistakes, keeps polluting, then we do have powers to prosecute. This is just a little slide on we essentially the Environment Agency is here to say to farmers that you've got a problem, and we're never that prescriptive on how to fix the problem, and that's where our partners come in. So we're this Farm Herefordshire group. It's we've got the likes of Natural England and their catchment sensitive farmers, and the Wireless Foundation, who can come in. We can advise farmers to contact them, and they're the ones who can offer some real answers and some real solutions to the problem. I think, I won't play that video. I think that's me done pretty much. Just go through my notes. I think I've covered just about everything. I've probably eaten into Ozzy's time. So there we go. I'll stop sharing the screen. Stop.
Thanks, Dougal. That's really great. I'll just see if I can get this back to where we need to get it back to. Hopefully. Okay, so I'm just trying to get the slides on a bit, so just bear with me a second. Has that come up as a main slide there, Dougal?
I can just see now. I can just see, I can see the other slides as well. So
sorry.
Yeah, pick slideshow. Yeah, from beginning. Oh no, you don't want to do. Well, you can skip through, can't you, from there?
Yeah. From beginning. Okay. I can't get rid of those small. Had it earlier before, but.
What's that little box just above your mouse that might be interfering?
Sorry, yeah, resume a slide. So there we go. Sorry, yeah, okay. So let's move on. Thank you, Dougal. That's brilliant. So yeah, my role really within the Environment Agency is I'm a catchment coordinator working in the Y and the low catchments. Part of my role is to sort of use funding that we have from government, from DEFRA, and to link with wider partners and stakeholders to develop projects, to develop integrated projects that deliver a number of solutions similar to what Dougal has just been talking about, really. So it's about trying to fix things and to make the best value, really, with the resources that we've got. So I'm going to talk a little bit about natural flood management now. And to put it into context, really, with some of the stuff that Dougal has been talking about just a few moments ago. So obviously, we've all been affected one way or another with the recent flooding that we've had. Very significant floods this last year. Two of the biggest events that we've recorded, especially with one there on the Y, I think it was the biggest flood recorded since records began. And with obviously climate change, the impacts we're seeing with sort of global warming, these events are becoming sort of more frequent, and the sort of damage and the impact that they have obviously affects communities and affects everybody, really. It affects the infrastructure, obviously causes a lot of damage, in excess of billions of pounds worth of damage to properties. In the extreme cases, we've obviously had sadly loss of life as well. So devastating impacts from flooding, which appears to be getting more sort of frequent. So we're looking to do work to obviously address some of this. And natural flood management really is another tool in the toolkit. We have traditional schemes that we fund from government to engineer and build structures, but natural flood management really is about working with natural processes and using sort of the whole catchment approach. So this slide here is about work that we can do upstream in the catchments to store water. Natural flood management, it's really about storing water. It's about slowing water, attenuating water in the headwaters, really, to reduce the impacts further downstream. And there's a number of measures that we're looking to put in place with our partners, and these vary depending on the sort of landscape that we're working in. So the picture there, we've got measures that we can put in. We can plant more trees, for instance, up in the headwaters to sort of soak up some of that water. We can put hedgerows in. We can improve the infiltration in the soils and in the land, working with landowners and farmers to get more water stored within the land. And we can introduce debris, woody debris, leaky wooden structures. Some of you may have heard about that, within the channel to sort of slow the flow of water and to also roughen the sort of hydraulic to add hydraulic roughness to slow water down. And all this in accumulation sort of does provide benefits further downstream, and I'll go on in a minute to show and demonstrate some of that work. So the slides that we got here, these are just a few examples of natural flood management. So we talked about work within the forestry. The picture on the left there, that's an attenuation pool which fills up when it rains, and then it stores water, and then it releases water slowly back into the trees and further sort of down the slope. And we're sort of building these sort of structures in places where we have a high risk of surface water runoff that's being collected, and we can target the measures sort of accordingly. The picture on the right is just an offline attenuation pond adjacent to a watercourse, which fills up when the stream is running and then releases water back into the stream at a slower rate. And these also provide wider benefits as well, because they're great for ecology and ecosystems, and it provides a lot of wildlife and habitat, which obviously adds a lot of value within the catchment as well. So the structures here, these are what we call leaky wooden structures or leaky dams, and we're putting a number of these in our watercourses in the headwaters. Many of you might have heard about the Stroud NFM work that's been going on there now for a few years in Gloucestershire. And this really is having a great benefit for slowing the flow and reducing the flows within the channels. Talked about land management. Dougal's done some, has talked about the work that he's been involved with, and there's great benefits to be had for, obviously, introducing cover crops, making sure that the soils are not bare during the winter. That adds structures into the soil, root zones, which is great for absorbing water. And these are the sorts of things now that we're having to see, included. And it's becoming sort of more than common practice. It's becoming sort of essential now within our catchment, which is great to see. The natural flood management work we've got, it also sort of, we have to sort of fit it around the various landscapes that we've got. So we've got wooded landscapes, forestry sort of landscapes. We've got grassland landscapes. The picture on the top right there is in the Cotswolds, where we've got sort of short grassland, which is obviously being grazed heavily there. You'll see it's been sort of impacted there by grazing, which generates a lot of runoff. We've got Herefordshire, bottom left, and Shropshire catchments there with land use and land management. The bottom right picture there is an urban type environment. That's the River Severn in Worcester, and there's lots of natural flood management that is happening in and around the city brooks of these urban places. In West Midlands area, the green patch there is our West Midlands area. We've got 4 funded projects that are funded through DEFRA as part of a trial, a longer term trial. Nationally, there's 26 of these catchments that are doing natural flood management work, and this is all about gathering evidence and data to show the benefits of natural flood management. So this is all being reported back to DEFRA, just to sort of show the benefits of this work, and then hopefully that evidence can then be used to fund future natural flood management projects in the future, sort of going forward. Just as an example, in Herefordshire, we're talking about Herefordshire quite a lot at the moment, but we've got 7 projects in Herefordshire where we're doing natural flood management work, and that's working very closely with our partners and with the council as well as ordinary watercourses there where this work is happening. And it is really about doing stuff around sort of land management and soils. So we've seen lots of these types of pictures. We want to see less of that sort of happening. And storing water in the soil is a fantastic opportunity, and basically we can store quite a bit of water in those soils, and just increasing the organic matter in the soil can really increase the holding capacity of soils. And 1 hectare of soil there can sort of hold 1.5 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water if the conditions are right. So if you sort of scale that up within the catchment, there's a fantastic opportunity of storing more water if we can improve the health of our soils. So I think that's really obviously a great opportunity looking forward. Dougal's already mentioned about the importance of working in partnership with a lot of this work. So to get the best value of the money that we have, working in partnership, doing lots of advice and guidance and sharing best practice is particularly important, and it's really important to get the communities involved as part of this as well, because in terms of sustainable land management, looking sort of further ahead, to get the communities fully involved and landowners engaged with this work is very important, because it's communities can then see how this work benefits them. So we've been working closely with land or catchment advisors through our Rivers Trust. We've been using the Winus Foundation and the Seven Rivers Trust to do some of this work for us. So, and this, as part of this landowner engagement, it's about understanding the issues, having conversations about the types of issues on the farm, and looking for solutions in these higher risk parts of the catchment that Dougal's already identified. So there are a number of measures that we can use to improve and reduce the amount of water that's running off the land. And there's some examples there of the types of measures that we're looking at. And 4 key things really that we're looking at as part of this process is we're looking at the The soil, we're looking at the amount of organic matter within the soils, because clearly we can just raise the organic matter in the soil slightly. That gives much more water attenuation and storage in the soils, which is particularly important. So soil organic matter, we're looking at structures of the soils, how to improve the soil structure. We don't want blocky soils, we want good structured soils that will drain freely and store water. Further down in the soil sort of profiles, that's what we need to be getting to, those sort of deeper parts of the soil to store water. Also looking at the amount of earthworms that are in the soils, because obviously that's an indication of the soil health. The more earthworms, the better the health of the soils generally. So that's particularly important. It's a good indicator of the soil health that we've got. And also doing some infiltration tests on site, just to understand, which parts of the farm are, draining freely, and which parts of the farms are, not draining so freely. So that's all important information that then can be pulled together and used to inform the types of measures that can be used. So I say looking to improve the water holding capacity there, looking at a variety of different crop types, introducing grass lays, more sort of permanent grass for that, and improving infiltration rates, looking at rotational grazing, and also areas to avoid with high risk crops, particularly that Dougal's also picked up on there. And then looking at funding opportunities to deliver the types of measures that we want to see within the catchment. And these reports that we've been pulling together brings all this information together in a package, and then hopefully can go on to fund some of the measures that we want to see sort of in place. And we've been using the money through the DEFRA funded pot of money that we've been having to set up a grant scheme. This is on the Herefordshire webpage if you want to go and have a look at it, but it's basically funding for a lot of the different interventions that provides these sorts of benefits that we're looking for. And obviously in the future, more long term, we like to see more of this sort of shape through the ELM system, the environmental land management system that's coming into play, and especially around sort of natural capital. So that will shape how things will be done, I think, in the future, looking forward. Mentioned about some of the data and evidence that we're collecting as part of the projects, which is very important. The picture here just shows some work which we've just started looking at infiltration rates in our soils. So we're comparing different scenarios. We're looking at grasslands, we're looking at arable soils, we're looking at different organic matters within those soils, we're looking at different grazing patterns, just to get a bit of a picture as to how the measures can benefit infiltration into those soils at greater depth. And then hopefully we can use that information to model the catchments to predict, how much water we can store in those soils, in those catchments, and how much of a difference it can make to communities that are at risk of flooding sort of further downstream. And we're also linking up with some universities and organisations. So Worcester University has been working with us to map out, again using drone imagery, to look at soil erosion rates within fields and soil losses, and the types of measures then, so looking at before and after scenarios, putting measures in place, and then looking at how that's reduced the amount of runoff and soil erosion within the fields, which is great. A couple of quick ones there, working with Cranfield University, bottom right hand pictures down near Ross-on-Wye, introducing grass waterways on high risk fields. That's where things like asparagus is being grown in sort of silty, sandy soils, which are prone to erosion risk. The top left picture, that's Missouri, a bit of kit that's being used for direct drilling, and the benefits there are fantastic in terms of crop yield that's been observed, and also obviously the reduction in runoff from that site. So I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this sort of technology that's being used now for things like min-till, which is creating bringing great benefits. Bottom left-hand picture, the two pictures there. The picture in the background is actually I think it was a potato crop followed by winter wheat. That was conventionally ploughed and harrowed, and in the foreground is where it's had direct drill, again following potatoes with winter wheat. And the difference between the two, walking across those fields, the field in the background you're squelching along, the mud sticking to your boots, and it's causing lots of, has been causing a lot of erosion, whereas the picture in the foreground, fantastically drained, and the yield is improved, and just better results all around, really. So that's the sort of thing we hoping to see more of in the future. So quick summary then, really. Integrated NFM is delivering lots of benefits, not only for flood risk, but also for improved water quality, improved habitat, and also for profitability in farming as well. So we're seeing some good stuff there. We recognise that the community engagement part is essential going forwards. We can't do this without the support and the help of landowners and farmers. It's great if we can work together with this and share our experiences and our knowledge. Healthy soil really is key to reducing a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the catchments. And the future funding will require the delivery of natural capital investment interventions. So it is important really to sort of get on board with how things will be funded in the future to work together to deliver all these sort of benefits. And just finally, we are developing our understanding of natural flood management is increasing all the time. Nationally, we're getting a lot of information now that's coming back, and we want to start sharing this more widely amongst everybody, really, so that we can all benefit from this work. So that's me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, hopefully, and go back and back to the panel. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jenny, Dougal, and Andrew. I'll invite any questions if folks want to sort of put their questions in the chat, and then we can sort of pick them up. I don't see that we've got anything at the moment, but I'll perhaps sort of just start the ball rolling a little bit. Now, I think it was probably it's relating either to Andrew or Dougal's sort of presentation. You were talking about, obviously farmers have got an obligation to not leave bare soil over winter and that. And I think it was Dougal was talking about the maize being a particularly sort of high level or highlighted culprit for soil erosion and that, and then soil practices around it. Do you think there's going to get to the point where maybe legislation will come in which basically is saying you will put some sort of an undersown mat or some sort of vegetation underneath the crop if you're going to grow that crop, maybe on particular types of soil or what?
Yeah. So in 2018, April 1st, I think, new legislation did come in. So it's called the Farming Rules for Water. And I probably should have put a slide on. And in fact, I did have a slide there, but it just sort of, I didn't want to overkill the time. But so new legislation came in whereby farmers now have there's 7 rules. I think rule 6 is the big one for us. And essentially says that farmers should take all reasonable precautions. So the legislation came in 2018. DEFRA gave farmers a year's grace, so advice and guidance, but now we're starting to tighten the screw. So this autumn we wrote to, I think it was 1,200 farmers in Herefordshire, reminding them of their duties. So it's now, essentially it's an offence for soil to wash off, be it maize, be it potatoes, those 2 crops spring to mind because of their late harvesting and the sheer scale. But I don't want to pick on them too much. But yeah, the legislation is there, and we also have environmental permitting regulations. The Environment Act. There is legislation that says you must not pollute watercourses. Up until 2018. It's always been quite difficult for us because you physically have to get a sample and prove an upstream and downstream effect a watercourse. So although it's a diffuse issue, you had to prove a point source pollution, but those rules have now changed. So if we've got decent photographic imagery or video or something from the drone that demonstrates that soil leaving the field because of poor farm land management, then we can proceed to the next level if necessary. And we've got a whole load of civil sanctions that allow us to enforce that. But it is inherently difficult when you have winters like last year, when all farmers, farming is a gamble. It always has been. It's a toss up between making money and making a mess, I'm afraid, and it's getting the balance right. So we do have powers to carry out, and those are that they're as fresh and live as ever. So we're all feeling our way a bit with these new bits of legislation, but I think farmers are starting to realise that they're not going to get away with it for quite so long. And we are, we do have eyes on certain sites. So yeah, watch this space on that one. Does that answer the question, Simon?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. Yeah, I see Brian Matthews, well, he sent me a message to say he's raised his hand. So Brian, if you'd like to unmute yourself and you can ask the question.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, under the participants box, there's a little thing you can raise hands if you want to speak. Just let you know that.
Oh, yeah.
Really interesting presentations. I've spent a lot of time working in Africa, and I've seen the damage that maize has done to soils there, appalling damage. And I'm exceedingly pleased, actually. I didn't know about this new legislation, but that really does sound sensible, because there's this whole kind of talk about 60 harvests left, but if people farm badly, then they're cutting their own throats for the future. So that really does sound important. My question is around, there's been some talk of late around this kind of organic farming method where you actually use cattle in fairly intensive kind of blocks, and then you move them across a field so that they crap in the field and then work it into the field, and then you move them across, and that can lead to quite rapid soil buildup. I wondered if you've heard of that at all, as a method to try and increase your organic content in the soil. And the second question was around beavers, really, because Andrew, looking at your bit, I was just wondering if beavers could do a better job, perhaps. But anyway, over to you. Thank you.
Do you want to answer the first bit, anybody, and I can do the beavers bit?
I can. I mean, they haven't read of any new project or anything, but essentially the sort of farming method you describe, I guess, is quite the opposite of new. It's probably what used to happen when small holdings, when these farms in Herefordshire were just that, little farms, and they did a little bit of livestock and they did a little bit of arable, and they rotated and it was all great. But sadly, the scale of farming in Herefordshire and the contracts, contract farming is a huge thing now, because the machinery to grow maize, harvest maize, grow potatoes, harvest potatoes is huge. It sits under storage for most of the year, and then it's a massive demand. And so most of the farming you see in Herefordshire, I can only speak of, but most of it is tenanted. So the farmer himself, the landowner, is sat by the fire most of the year, being paid to rent the land to the big guys, and the big guys have big machinery, and they've got big contracts, and the contracts are 4, 5, 6 years in the making, and they need more space for the machinery, so they're taking out hedgerows. So but they certainly don't want to be shrinking everything back down again to more manageable little plots of land, and then they don't necessarily, they're arable farmers, they don't deal with livestock. So that's my take on it, be it a slightly cynical one. And it's I think they like to spread the mark for sure, and they like to spread the slurry, and the chickens, and it's all a big, large scale. So it's managing that really as much as anything else. I tend to deal with, and I'm not going to mention any names whatsoever, but I tend to deal with the same guys over and over because they are the big guys, and they have these contracts, and it's quite difficult to break. I'm not saying that they're not unwilling to work with us at all, but they have a routine and they have a crop rotation, and there's a lot of money involved in those rotations. So it's breaking that cycle. And yes, it would be nice to see less intensive farming and some more, bring back the orchards and the Herefordshire bull and everything else. But sadly, at the moment, it's not going that way quite.
There is some really interesting stuff, actually.
Can I just come in quickly?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, God, there's a bit of a delay. I was just going to say, I haven't come across that. Am I frozen?
We can't
No,
see.
I'll keep going anyway. Okay, I'm off. I think it's a video. Come across that intensive grazing in the Cotswolds. There was a farm open event that I went to a few years ago, and they were moving the cattle every day. So they were on a piece, and they had electric fencing set up, and they moved it every single day. So it was very intensively grazed, but then it was rested for quite a while. And they had really good organic matter, and they had really good biodiversity as well. I haven't come across it in Herefordshire, but I know it is out there, and people are doing it. And on that farm that I went to, it did seem to be having good results.
Jenny, that's really interesting because it has been trialled a lot in the States, where, of course, they've had massive problems. You sort of think back to the 1930s and the Dust Bowl. And there's a film that's been made recently with Woody Harrelson, quite a famous movie actor, called
Fantastic.
Kiss the Ground. And they show that methodology in that film. And it's available free to watch on YouTube these days, as well as Netflix.
I can say it's brilliant. I've seen it myself, and it's it's wonderful. It's really good.
Yeah, just to add also, there are a couple of sites that I'm aware of doing exactly what you were talking about, Jenny. I think there's a site in on the Arrow up in Pembridge that does that, similar to what you were just talking about now. So, but what we are keen to see more of are these, where people are demonstrating this, the sorts of sites that we can then use with our partners to share these examples, because that's the best way of getting these messages across, within the farming communities. Everybody loves it, and it's just, if you've got one farmer who's sort of demonstrating, I was on a farm a couple of weeks ago. It's looking at regenerative farming, and they've got a number of trials across their farm which they're showing, well, if you do it this way, this is what happens. If you do it the other way, these are the benefits. And that's great. That's really fantastic to see on the ground. But beavers, Brian, to answer your question on the second part, I mean, they're being used more frequently now. We've had some trials nationally down in Devon on the River Otter, linking with Exeter University, doing some research there. And again, results amazing in terms of what they're managing to sort of do to the landscape. I suppose the only sticking point is whether you've got landowners who want to have their land managed in that way. If you have, fantastic, because the benefits for slowing the flow and improving water quality and increasing biodiversity habitat is tremendous. So we have got a few sites now opening up, and I know there's rumours that beavers have been introduced in various parts of the catchment. under the cover of dark and is going, is going on. So I think yes, it's great, but as I say, it's about having that sort of understanding and landowner sort of permissions really to do it.
What might be called the acceptable side of rewilding, I guess.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I think they've NEP. They've had some success. They NEP. Have you read the Isabella Tree book, Wilding? I think they've finally been given the go ahead to install the beaver, as it were. And we've got them in the Forest of Dean, haven't we? In secret locations, but they seem to be doing amazing things. And it's a clear. There's just why not? Yeah, absolutely. You're on mute there, Brian.
Sorry, I'm in the Cotswolds, and one of the local farmers here actually introduced them about 25 years ago, which was quite. But he had to get rid of them eventually when his house started to flood. That's another story. Anyway, I'll leave it. Cheers. Thank you.
Okay. Bill Basford, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Right. Just show me who you are. That's right. Going back to potatoes, coming off maize, which I think a lot of us know too much about and its effect. But coming back into potatoes, quite often see on fairly big slopes the accumulation down from the rows during the growing period to actually move fine soils down to the lower headland, which then is a massive problem for turning and everything with all the big equipment that you say about. Are you aware that in Herefordshire, have they done any work with things like the tide ridger or the wonder wheel to try and hold water back, or even in cereals tram lines? There's been quite a bit of work going on to roughen up the soils in the tram lines to try and hold that back. Has it been any interest down there?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. With part of the funding that we're putting forward under the capital grant scheme is to include some of those measures. I'm not aware of. I'm aware of it being done in other sites nationally with good results, particularly on tram lines. And as we know, they do generate lots of water where they are sort of compacted. So I think they're good things to be doing. But I'm not aware of any sites in Herefordshire that are doing it at the moment. Unless Dougal, I don't know if you know of any.
I've got some farmers that are particularly good at going in with the chisel plow, for example, after a potato harvest quickly, not dilly-dallying around and getting that chisel plow in there, and that can be really important to break that compressed soil. Much of the soils, last winter, you often hear it, don't you? Oh, the soils are saturated, so now everything's going to flood. But if you go out onto some of these fields, especially around the gateways where the machinery comes in and out and the pressure point's there, and if you go there with a spade and you dig a foot down, that soil is not saturated, it's capped. You'll dig and that much of it is a slimy, worm-free, compressed, horrible, sticky stuff. And then underneath it, it's dry. So this is part of the problem. And yeah, you're quite right. The technology is there, I think, and the machinery is there. It's just breaking the habit of a lifetime for some farmers. So it's the machine. I mean, I should go to more farm shows. I'm not much of an expert on farm machinery. I certainly seen bits and pieces, and farmers do love it when you get chatting to them about their farm machinery. They really like a chat about that. But no, I must say I'm not a leading expert on the actual equipment, because I always get called out to the bad sites that are already knackered and they're making no effort, because that's my line of work. But Aussies finding some sweeter places with that one you've got, Oz, that looks really good in near Ross. So we're going to go and fly the drone there, and he seems to be doing all sorts of really lovely stuff that's not so intensive and really thinking about the environment. And it can be done. You know, you can benefit. Everything can benefit, and you can profit as well. It can be done. It's just changing those habits that we seem to have slipped into in the last 20, 30 years of intensive agriculture. Yeah,
I think one of the slides I put up was showed, I don't know if you can remember, it was a gully that had formed coming down the field.
Yeah.
And that was just where, you know, the sort of ploughing would be going up and down the slope, and then they'd switched, and they'd obviously tried it differently, and they'd gone across the slope, and just walking across that field this you know, a couple of weeks ago, and the difference that had made, I think, and introducing more organic matter into the soil had made a real difference on that site, and it wasn't washing at all. It was great to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Anna, you have a question.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, if you'd like to give you
Okay, I just typed in the chat. Sorry. I was just curious to know what, in terms of that situation in the on the River Lug recently, that a farmer done a bit of a clearing and cut the bank, and I was just wondering if he's found that that what he'd done was not quite right, and he was not allowed to. What would he be expected to do to rectify the clearing, and if there would be any repercussions due to potential damage being done downstream?
Anna, I'll have to be very careful with what I say on this, because it's a very live incident, and it's it's very political. You'll notice the Environment Agency keeping very quiet on social media and in the press about this, but that's by no means to say that we're not taking a keen interest on this one. It's quite the opposite. We are taking a very serious stance on that particular site. Essentially, all sorts of regulations and laws are broken when somebody starts trying to alter any watercourse, let alone a triple SI or a SAC as special as the Lug. There were an absolute huge collection of offences are made when people go about sort of realigning natural watercourses like that, and then it goes against everything that we work towards, really. So without wanting to mention much more on that, for our legal purposes, yeah, mark my words, we're taking that one very seriously.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, any more questions from anyone else? I'll look through the participants, see if there's any.
I've got a question, Simon.
Oh, David, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis with Brexit, and there's going to be a change of payments from production to more environmental measures. Do you think that's going to help the situation with farmers being more careful with their soils, or do you think it's going to force farmers to be more intensive to try and cut their losses?
It's a very good question, and I think it's a conversation that probably a lot of people are having right now at the moment. But there are obvious advantages, as I hope we pointed out with our presentations, about why soil is better managed in the way that we're talking about, this regenerative type farming, trying not to disturb the soil as much as possible. just doing things differently brings about all those other benefits, which obviously also means that we can, you know, have less in the way of sort of pesticides and fertilizers applied to the land as well. And it's all about keeping those soils healthy, about keeping them alive, isn't it? For improved yields and improved benefits. But no doubt about it, you know, the way that we, you know, future funding is going to be about these types of introducing these types of measures. So I don't think there's any getting away from that, and I think it's really important that the conversations are started. And but I think more importantly, it's about learning, isn't it? It's about sharing these experiences and understanding the benefits that has. And the thing that gets landowners and farmers talking the most, obviously, it's about, at the end of the day, it's about profitability and finance. And if things can be done and managed in a better way, that you know, we know that the costs are going up and up and up and up, and the price of the products are stable or reducing. So the gap's closing, and there's a greater squeeze on things. So but I think, you know, it's about those conversations, about that learning from one another about those benefits, which is important. And it, you know, no doubt about it, it's you know, landowners can do an awful lot for improving the way the water is coming off the land and slowing it and managing it, and it's helping them to retain that water, and it helps in periods of drought. And, you know, where we've got issues in the summer, everything drying up, it's hopefully more water will be stored, opportunities for storing water on land, great opportunities there for developing systems to hold back and store water, which can then be used more sustainably. So I think there's lots of benefits to be had. It's about the conversations that need to happen, and those sort of shared learning really from it. I don't know if that's answered your question, but I hope it's
Yeah. I think it'll be really beneficial for landowners rather than the tenants. I think people may well start to think, hang on here, the money should be more targeted, hopefully, you know, rather than just, oh, got to get round. Oh, is that the time I've got to go and flail my hedgerows to try and make sure I get my single farm payment? Or, you know, I think hopefully these can be better designed. I think Natural England will have hopefully better control as to what sort of projects can be done. And if that means taking one of your big fields out and putting it into a long-term wetland project, well, great. Because, you know, we're always going to have areas of intensely farmed soil and you know, lack of biodiversity. But if just round the corner you've got a lovely wetland, then it's a huge step in the right direction.
Okay, Brian, you have another question.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys do anything with air quality at all. That may be another department for the Environment Agency. But I know that recently there have been findings which have shown that, for example, it's the ultra fine pollutants that come out of incinerators that are causing probably the worst harm in terms to people's lungs, because you breathe in these ultrafine particulates. The trouble at the moment, as I understand it, with that is that the legislation hasn't caught up. And I'm just wondering, do you have examples of other areas that you've been involved with that you've seen there's a need for legislation, but it hasn't got through Parliament yet? And how do you, when you come across those sorts of situations, how do you push Parliament to actually change their legislation?
I can answer the second bit, and then maybe somebody can have a go at the first bit there, Brian. But I mean, a lot of these issues that we find within the catchments, you've heard of the sort of catchment partnerships that are sort of in operation through the catchment-based approach. So there's 108 catchments that are funded to sort of basically as bringing people together to highlight those types of issues. And the catchment partnerships are a very good mechanism for feeding back on issues of concern that can be channeled back up, and obviously either through, and also through local councils and MPs as well is a good means of doing that. But yes, certainly strategic type issues that need to be resolved. The catchment partnership's a good way of doing that. I mean, we've had the challenges and choices consultation document that's also been recently circulated and released. So it's an opportunity for people to come back to feed back on their thoughts around that's primarily about sort of water quality, but those types of consultation documents can be quite useful for that as well. But yes, certainly the soils one, about the sort of having something in place to we're very grateful that we've got some new legislation to help with soil management side of things. But again, I don't know, Jenny or Dougal, if you've got any other thoughts on the some of the other issues.
I think there'll always be, as you go through time, there'll always be, things change and there'll be a need for new legislation. I suppose the issue is that if just time, so we or others can identify an issue that could be sort of rectified with appropriate legislation, but there will always be a time lag in that and some situations we might not have the ability to deal with in the way that we would like, because the legislation hasn't really caught up. And it's just as working with the catchment partnerships and through our environment agency sort of national teams and DEFRA, and sort of feeding it up that way as well, that we can highlight where we are getting issues that we just potentially are stuck with because we haven't got the legislation that's kind of keeping up with technology changes and different changes in how businesses are run and what's profitable, and things can change, and businesses can do different things, and the legislation hasn't been written to account for those changes. So yeah, I think we do highlight where we have got issues with legislation, but there is always going to be a bit of a time issue, because obviously legislation changes and new legislation does take quite a long time to get through.
I should show my hand and say that I'm actually a Wiltshire councillor. But I would be interested to hear how these recent rule changes, what was the system that worked them through so that they actually reached Parliament? Do you happen to know that? Because I mean, they sound really, really important and good. Was it presumably through the Environment Agency, or was it through another route?
I'm pretty sure it would have been through the Environment Agency, and DEFRA would have discussed what was needed, and it would have gone that way. But I can find out and get you more detail if you need that, or if you're interested.
That would be most kind. And if I leave my my email address in the chat, then you've got it.
The other thing, just to quickly add, is we've picked up on a few things previously, especially with the soil stuff. We've had senior directors from the Environment Agency come out on site with us to look at the problems, and that is a great way of getting the message across, isn't it, Dougal, to go out and show them firsthand, what's happening on the ground. It's quite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, got their boots muddy for sure. It's good to get the big wigs out there to show them exactly what the fight we're fighting. It's But in terms of air quality, gosh, it's not my bag, I'm afraid. We've got experts, but I'm not one of them. I stick to water. That's my field. But yeah, we do have these environmental permits for absolutely everything. If it's likely to cause harm, then you can, likelihood is, if it's a big industrial process, you're going to need a permit from us. And we regulate them. We regulate all sorts of things that you wouldn't even think about. I wouldn't want to be a permitting officer. Some of these guys have to sign off these forms, and get it wrong. And I get consulted on discharge consents, for example, so sort of sewage treatment works, or if anything's of a certain size, then I'm asked to comment on it, as well as all the other stuff we do. And sometimes you get it wrong and it comes back to bite you on the bottom. It's one of those, but yeah, permitting, it's a big business for the agency for sure.
Okay, I think we've run out of our questions, unless there's anybody else who's wants to come in with a late.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. I think my little boy's going to be desperate for his bedroom now. Probably very much past his bedtime. So
well, I think I think with that, then we'll perhaps call the meeting to a close, and I must say thank you very much to both, well, all three of you, Jenny, Andrew, and Dougal, for your presentation and entertaining our questions and all the rest of it. So if we'll do one of these sort of virtual hand claps now, or whatever it is, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers now. Good night, everyone.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.